How's it going, everyone? So today's video is going to be part 2 of the belltech 2.4 kit. 2 inches lower in the front, 4 inches lower in the rear. And if you guys haven't seen the first video to this, be sure to check out the other video. I'll link it in above, or you'll also see at the end of this video a link to the first step, which was the front of the belltech 2.4 kit, the front springs and shocks as well. So today's video, I'm going to be tackling the rear. I already just about got it jacked up, but I kind of just want to stop there and run through the whole thing with you guys. Anyways, this kit for the rear consists of a few parts. So we have the springs. So these are the 2 springs that are going to be dropping the truck 4 inches lower. I have their Street Performance struts, shocks. So those both are there. And the other component to this whole fiasco is this bracket. So this is the bracket that's actually going to put the rear track bar into alignment, and it's going to correct the angle on that. What this kit doesn't take into account, and this is one of the biggest complaints with this kit, is putting the rear axle back into alignment with the drive shaft and also back into alignment with the center of the wheel. So the wheel right now, with it being stock, you can see it's pretty well centered in that wheel well. Once we put this kit in, I can't exactly remember which way, but it's going to be driven, I believe, closer to the front as the axle articulates on the control arms forward. I think those control arms get shorter, dragging the wheel to the front of the vehicle. So it's not going to be perfectly centered in that wheel well. The axle is also going to be rotated ever so slightly, so it's going to be pointed down more. These are all issues that we're going to have to address after, but I just want to cover for today just the kit. Put it in, see how it behaves, see how it looks, all that stuff. We already have adjustable control arms. We're probably gonna have to get some different brackets. We know all the issues that are gonna come from this, but we do wanna tackle it, document the whole process for you guys, and show you what's involved. So I'm gonna jack this truck up. You have to get the rear wheels 4 to 6 inches off the ground to be able to do this. You guys might be asking why we're not using a lift. I have the Viper here, transmission's out of it. I'd have to push it outside, and to do this by myself, to push this vehicle down the driveway and back in, is kind of impossible for me by myself. So we're doing it on the floor. Most of the people that are going to do this themselves are going to be doing this procedure with a floor jack, with jack stands. Got the jack stands there, so that's the way we're going to do it. So not a big deal. I'm gonna get it done. We already got the front done the same way, with on the floor with jack stands and a jack, and we're gonna do the rear the same way. Anyways, enough of the talking. I'm gonna get this thing cracking. We'll get to work. So the wheels are off. Obviously, the truck is supported by jack stands, and we have the floor jack just supporting the axle. So what you're gonna do next, first thing, is disconnect your rear sway bar. So that's held on by 18mm nut and a 8mm wrench or ratchet, like I have, is going to hold that ball joint from spinning. So we're going to remove and disconnect, well, I guess just disconnect actually, the sway bar. So I'm going to disconnect from both sides, and then we'll move on to the next step. So the sway bar is now disconnected from both sides. You can see it's disconnected there. Next step, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have a floor jack supporting your axle, and we're gonna remove these 21mm bolts that are holding the bottom of the shock in. So there's a nut on the back, and the bolt goes through this way. So you can actually get a gun in from the back, like I'm gonna do there, and I'm gonna hold it with another 21 here, and we should be able to just zip those off real quick. So let's get done. Now that both of the shocks are disconnected from the axle on the bottom, we can use the floor jack to lower it, and then these coil springs should be able to come out. Alright, just like that, you can see that the coil spring is pretty much free. Might have to put the camera down to do this, but I should be able to just get them out of here. Okay, so springs are removed. They're over here standing on the ground, and I have to kind of laugh because after 114,000 miles, the passenger side, which you can tell the fuel tank is on the left-hand side, passenger side spring is longer than the driver's side. I don't know if it's because the fuel tank on the side has been getting compressed so much more, or that much more load on the driver's side, but this is the passenger side spring, which is slightly taller. It's almost, I want to say, a good half-inch taller than the driver's side spring here. And then this is a comparison of how much shorter the belltech springs are. So they're significantly shorter. I'd say a good 4 inches, which is the drop that we're going to get, but they are a good 4 inches shorter than those ones. So if you were just going to replace the springs, you would be popping these springs back in. But what I am going to do next is replace these shocks. So in order to do that, this is kind of the nightmare part, which I think I was mentioning at the beginning of this video, is the bolt to get to these is up there behind this liner. So it doesn't come out too easy. Some people take out the whole fender liner. I'm going to try and just sneak it or cheat it a little bit. I can take out this one screw there and just kind of wrench it on the way out. So it's going to be the same thing, 21 millimeter head bolt, but I'm going to remove this 8 mil bolt that's holding in the fender liner, just give me a bit more clearance, and get this shock out, well, both shocks out, but let's get them out. So I actually decided just to take the fender liner out. It's not that many more screws, and it's going to save us from trying to monkey around with a wrench in there way up there. So it's really not that much more work. Just take the fender liner out, and then I'm hoping we can either get a ratchet or a gun on there. Some guys actually will drill out a hole. They'll carve out a hole here exactly where the bolt is, so they can put a gun straight in, so that it's easy to change in the future without having to mess with any of this stuff. So it's another option too if you guys are considering changing your shocks quite a bit. But yeah, it's just a matter of taking out all these bolts, which I'm on the last one, and then this thing is, I know it's awkward to get out, but it does come out. So we'll finish taking out this last bolt. Okay, so now that we have that out, we can just straight get the gun on there, which is going to save us a ton of time, honestly. So this should just be the 21 millimeter. Pop a gun on here. This is what I remember. So there's actually a nut on the back that is an absolute pain to get to. So it's also 21 millimeter. So let me get a wrench on the back of that nut so we can get this out. Now that is a pain to get something on the back to get this bolt out, but we got it. So there's the old shock, and you gotta stick your hand back in here to get the nut out. So there's a 21 millimeter nut that's on the back. So I'm gonna grab the new shock and put it in here, and we'll move on to the other side. Alright, so that shock is on. We can move on to the other side and do the same thing. So both shocks are installed now. At least on the top portion, the bolts are in. And now we can move on to the fun part. So I'm going to put the fender liners back in because we don't need to mess with those anymore. And we can actually put the springs back in. And we can transfer over these top rubber portions. So see this indent here that's already created? You do want to match that onto the new one. So try to match up that indent right with the coil so that you have it settling as quickly as possible without it having to kind of find its place. So try to match that up as best as you can. Same with both sides, so same thing, you're going to see that indent where the coil ended. and you're gonna put it in the same spot. So that's pretty much it. The springs are ready. Let me slam those 2 fender liners in real quick, fight with those. They do go in there, but they are a bit of a pain to get in. Anyways, I'm gonna get those in, and then we can put the springs in. So the fender liners are both installed. Now, just before we get to the springs, one last step, the bump stops. So I've heard mixed things. Some people end up having to cut the bump stops off because they're hitting them. Belltech just recommends putting in shorter ones. I think these, since this is a used kit, this looks like somebody cut the stock ones, but I'm going to use these shorter ones because that's what I got. That's a stock one, just so you guys can see the height comparison. It's about half of it. And what you do is you get yourself a pair of man hands with blue gloves, and you just pop it out like so. And we can just go ahead and put in our shorter, smaller bump stops back in, and that's gonna be it. So it's gonna sit like that. I'm gonna do the other side. We'll get to the springs. So now wouldn't be a bad time to grab a friend, but you're gonna position the springs in place. Make sure that your rubber isolators, like I was mentioning earlier, are in the same kind of seating position as they were indented from the end of the coil as before. It's just gonna help settling, and you're gonna position them in like that. I mean, really there's nothing to it. You're just gonna sit it, but make sure that the smaller portion of the coil is wrapped around that little knurl, and you're gonna have to guide it up on top on the hat, because there's kind of an indentation where it goes. And then we'll just raise the axle up. So once the axle is raised up enough to where there's some tension on the springs, you're sure that they're seated correctly both on the bottom and on the top on that bucket up there. Then you're going to put in your lower shock bolt. For now we can just put them in loosely. I got this one in, I just tossed it in just to hold things, and I can go to the other side. And not sure if I can do it with one hand, but do the same thing. So we'll get our shock situated. And we're just going to put this in because these lower shocks are going to help to keep our springs in. These short shocks are actually shorter than the stock ones, so it won't allow the axle to fully extend and have the springs drop out. So probably not a bad idea to replace your shocks at the same time with some that are suited for lowering, because this is going to stop. This shock is going to extend only so far to allow the axle to drop down, because it's a shorter shock, and it'll prevent your springs from falling out if you go over a huge bump or something crazy. Anyways, these are done, and now we can move on to the track bar relocation bracket. Next step is removing the track bar. So you're going to remove the track bar off the axle side, not off the frame side, because we're going to have to install this little bracket doohickey, which is going to go like so. It's going to flip in there, and once that's gone, it's going to drop it so that the track bar can be on this side. So what we're going to do is, this is a 21, we're going to zip this off. It has this cool little wing nut thing on the back, so we don't have to worry about holding the nut. So we'll zip it off and go from there. Alright, so next is going to be this bracket, and what happens with this bracket is if I don't drop it first, it tucks into this hole here and goes like that. So that's how it goes, and it drops it down so the track bar can be down here. So the track bar is going to flip onto the bottom side here like so. And there's a bolt that goes through here that goes straight up and in. It's just this little bolt here, so that's going to go straight up. And then we have this bolt with some spacers and collars to make up for on this side. So I'm going to get this all mocked up, get the bolts in, and then we can tighten them down. Alright you guys, so this is a setup. It's basically a drop bracket, so it's dropping, and we're actually relocating the track bar on the other side of the original bracket, which is what this is doing. So what this is doing is, in anticipation of the axle going up with the shorter springs, track bar is going to be flipped on the other side to hopefully adjust it so that the axle is in the center. So these are BoostedMotorsports calculations, and you can see this is where or how it sits now. So this track bar is underneath instead of being here, and it's on this angle. I think once we actually get this thing loaded, I'm assuming the track bar is pretty much going to be level at this point. So anyways, we're pretty much done. All we have to do is put these sway bar end links back in. So we have to put this in, double check everything's tight, but that is pretty much it. Sway bar end links are pretty simple. Just gotta put those two nuts on, and I think we can put the wheels on and set this thing down, see what she looks like. Okay, so everything's on, everything's tight. You can already tell that it's hanging higher. The suspension is more retracted just with it hanging, free hanging right here, right now. So we're not gonna put the 20s on, we're gonna get the 24s. So we're gonna bolt up those 24s, put it on the ground, and see what we got. You guys ready for this? She is on the ground. Well, it's sitting on the ground, but this isn't as low as some of the other guys run it, but I think it looks just about right. For a two-wheel drive truck that we're trying to go for speed and not for off-road, I think this looks pretty dang good. You guys can let me know what you guys think, but I honestly don't think I would want to go any lower than this. Any lower would just be a bit too much in my opinion with this size of wheel. If you had smaller wheels, you could probably go lower, but with this big of a wheel, I think it sits pretty good. So once this settles, this is literally just me taking it off the jack stands and putting it on the ground. So as far as issues, you can probably see that the wheel is slightly more forward in the wheel well. I mean, unless somebody actually tells you, you don't really see it too much, but it is definitely further forward than it should be. What else can we see? If I look underneath, let's see if it looks strange down here. It's really hard to see. There's a gas tank on this side. We'll check on the other side and see if we can see maybe the axle looking a little strange where the diff lines up. I'm going to document all this stuff for you guys a little more thoroughly afterwards, but honestly, it doesn't look that bad. It looks pretty much straight in alignment with it. At least on my crew cab, the diff looks to be pretty aligned, not too bad. I don't know, some people might argue with that, but just visually looking at it, it honestly doesn't look that bad. It's not like the diff is on any sort of crazy angle with my drive shaft, so I don't know, we'll have to see. I know a lot of the issues that people complain of are on single cabs where they don't have a two-piece drive shaft. So the axle or the drive shaft already has some issues on those single cabs, and a lot of people tend to lower the single cab. So I'm going to fully document this for you guys. We'll get to the bottom of this, see just how it behaves, how it handles, and go from there. But if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up for me. Any questions, ask me in the comments below. I'll do my best to get to it, or usually somebody beats me to it. But if you guys haven't subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Check out the other videos on the channel. We've covered a lot on the Pro Charged Ram. Everything from an exhaust, an intake, canned tune, custom tune, all that stuff, it's here. So as always guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.